As Lisa passed within 10 feet of the culvert, the mountain lion exploded from the shadows with incredible speed, covering the distance in a single, powerful leap. His massive front paws struck Lisa between the shoulder blades with devastating force, sending her crashing face first onto the asphalt. His weight drove her to the ground. Her attempts to scream were cut short as the mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae with crushing force. His razor-sharp claws raked across Lisa's back and shoulders, opening deep gashes that severed major blood vessels and caused massive tissue damage. The 140-pound cat used his incredible strength to pull Lisa's body across the asphalt and down into the concrete culvert, where the darkness and confined space would provide protection while he fed. Lisa's body was recovered 3 hours later by a joint team of police officers and Colorado Parks and Wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill when the search teams approached, retreating further into the drainage network that connected to the natural creek system beyond the neighborhood. Lisa had died from massive trauma to her neck and spine. The mountain lion's killing bite had proved instantly fatal. The investigation revealed that Lisa had been jogging along her usual route when she inadvertently interrupted the mountain lion's hunt, triggering the attack that cost her life. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the following day, after being located in the foothills above the neighborhood. Another incident that year, on August 19th, involved Felicity Grant, who arrived at Boulder County Open Space in Colorado. This is a vast wilderness area known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife population. The mountainous region stretches across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails that attract outdoor enthusiasts. But these same wilderness areas also serve as prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 social media followers, had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. She was known for her entitled attitude and the belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from rules. She had already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance. Her demanding personality became evident when she berated the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail close. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. "I've often wondered about the arrogance that can blind us to the dangers around us. Take Felicity, for example. She tore down warning notices, believing that as a taxpayer, she had every right to use public trails, ignoring the very real threat of mountain lions. It's a chilling reminder that fitness and confidence don't make one invulnerable." Felicity had an encounter with a mountain lion on the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail. Before dawn, at 5:30 a.m., she began her solo run, headphones blasting electronic music, a backpack filled with raw steaks for her post-workout meal. She was trying to avoid what she called inferior hikers, but the combination of her erratic running, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created perfect conditions to attract a predator. A 140-pound male mountain lion had been hunting in the area, his territory including that very trail. He detected the scent from over a mile away and began tracking her. The cougar stalked Felicity along the ridge, using rocks and trees to remain hidden. As she rounded a bend, it positioned itself on a boulder 15 feet above the path. Completely unaware due to the music and her inflated sense of security, Felicity passed below. The mountain lion launched its attack. The predator struck from behind with tremendous force, claws raking down her back, paws wrapping around her shoulders and neck. Its canine teeth found their target, clamping down on the back of Felicity's neck with deadly precision. The attack was swift and efficient. The cougar applied crushing prees, severing the connection between her brain and body. She died within minutes from spinal cord severance, massive blood loss, and suffocation. The mountain lion dragged her body off the trail. 3 days later, a search and rescue team found her remains. The location and condition confirmed a mountain lion attack. Then there's the story of Jennifer Walsh. It was December 3rd, 2014. Fluorescent lights illuminated the kennels at the county animal shelter. Jennifer, a 25-year-old veterinary student, moved between the cages. She believed every animal deserved a second chance. As a weekend volunteer, she was known for advocating for the shelter's most difficult cases, gravitating toward the aggressive animals, the ones marked with red cards for immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes filled with rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including a severe attack on a neighbor's child. The behavioral assessment was clear: too dangerous for adoption. Scheduled for euthanization, Jennifer had been watching Diesel, looking for a sign of the gentle soul she believed was hidden beneath the aggression. She'd seen him pace, growl, and destroy toys. This brief hesitation gave Jennifer false confidence to slip the lead around his neck and guide him toward the isolation room. Once inside, Jennifer closed the door and removed Diesel's lead, believing freedom of movement would help him relax. The room was small, 8 by 10 FT, with concrete walls and no furniture except a metal folding chair. It was designed for safety, but also meant there was nowhere to run. For several minutes, Diesel stood rigid in the center, his eyes never leaving Jennifer's face. She sat in the chair and began talking to him, her voice gentle and encouraging, completely unaware she was being evaluated by a predator. The attack came when Jennifer stood and took a step toward Diesel, her hand extended in what she intended as a peaceful gesture. To Diesel, the movement represented a threat requiring immediate action. His 75 lbs launched across the room with explosive force, his jaws targeting Jennifer's throat with precision. Jennifer's scream was cut short as Diesel's teeth sank deep into her neck, crushing her windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single bite. His jaws locked onto their target with mechanical efficiency. Jennifer's hands clawed desperately at the dog's head, but Diesel had been bred for combat, his grip unbreakable once engaged. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone while maintaining his hold. Blood sprayed across the concrete walls as Jennifer's struggles grew weaker, her body going into shock from the massive trauma. The attack was swift, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Other volunteers heard Jennifer's initial scream and rushed toward the isolation room, but the heavy door was locked from the inside. By the time they could locate the key and safely enter, Jennifer lay motionless on the concrete floor, her life ebbing away in the pool of blood. Diesel stood over her body, his muzzle stained red, his eyes still burning with the same aggressive intensity that had marked him for euthanization. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Jennifer's injuries were beyond medical intervention. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her dream of becoming a veterinarian ended by the very type of animal she hoped to save. Diesel was immediately sedated and euthanized, his death as swift and clinical as the attack that had preceded it. The investigation that followed was thorough but predictable. Jennifer had violated multiple safety protocols, ignored clear warning signs, and placed herself in a situation that experienced professionals would have avoided. The shelter implemented new security measures, including electronic locks on isolation rooms and mandatory buddy systems for all volunteer activities. Jennifer's death became a cautionary tale in veterinary schools across the country. Her passion for primate conservation had led her to volunteer at legitimate sanctuaries and support organizations working to protect great apes in the wild. Jessica genuinely believed that her visit to Sunshine Primate Sanctuary would help promote conservation efforts through the photos she planned to take. That afternoon, Jessica was participating in what the facility marketed as an educational encounter with King, a 350 lb silverback gorilla who had been acquired from a defunct research facility. The sanctuary's minimal safety measures consisted of a chain-link barrier that separated visitors from the gorilla's enclosure with no additional protection or supervision from qualified staff. Silverback gorillas are among the most powerful primates on Earth. With adult males weighing up to 400 lb and possessing the strength of 10 grown men, these magnificent animals are highly intelligent and emotionally complex. But they're also territorial and can become extremely aggressive when they perceive threats to their domain. I've seen firsthand how quickly a seemingly calm animal can turn. It's a chilling reminder that we often misinterpret their behavior at our own peril. Their language is so complex, communicated not just through vocalizations, but through subtle shifts in body language, and that shift from calm to violence can happen in an instant. I read the story of Jessica, and it stayed with me for days. She approached a gorilla named King, camera in hand, wanting to capture his intelligence and emotional depth. King seemed relaxed, observing the visitors with what appeared to be curiosity. Jessica, eager to share a conservation message through her photographs, decided to reach through the fence, believing that physical contact would create a more powerful image. She thought his calm demeanor signaled friendliness. But it was, tragically, the calculated patience of a territorial animal assessing a potential threat. King's reaction was immediate and devastating. The moment her hand crossed the barrier, the 350-pound silverback seized her arm with incredible force, pulling her against the chain-link fence. Her scream, a sound of shock and pain, echoed through the facility as his grip tightened, crushing bone. Others tried to help, but his strength was simply overwhelming. He held her arm with one massive hand, while the other reached through, grabbing her head and shoulders, pulling her even harder against the inadequate fencing. His territorial instincts took over completely, driving him to continue his assault. His powerful hands inflicted terrible trauma to her head, neck, and arms, while she was trapped against that barrier. Her attempts to break free only seemed to escalate his aggression, as he interpreted her struggles as further threats to his domain. Her movements grew weaker as blood loss and crushing injuries overwhelmed her. King never loosened his grip. His fury focused on eliminating what he saw as an intrusion. Within minutes, her struggle ceased. The gorilla maintained his hold on her lifeless body, displaying threatening behavior toward anyone who approached. Emergency responders arrived with tranquilizer equipment, but it was too late. Jessica was gone. The investigation revealed that the Sunshine Primate Sanctuary was, in reality, an illegal roadside zoo, exploiting animals and visitors alike, with inadequate safety measures and animal care. Authorities raided the facility and shut it down, relocating the primates to legitimate sanctuaries. King was transferred to an accredited facility, where he could live out his life in conditions appropriate for his species. Jessica's death led to enhanced regulations for animal sanctuaries and stricter enforcement of wildlife protection laws. Her family established a foundation to support legitimate primate conservation efforts, ensuring her passion for animal welfare would continue through organizations that truly protect great apes, rather than exploiting them. Then there's the story from March 18th, 2017, in Mountain View Estates, North Carolina. It was the first warm evening of spring in that upscale neighborhood nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Maria Santos, a 41-year-old single mother and part-time dog walker, was making her rounds, caring for the pets of the wealthy residents. She'd been a dog walker for 3 years, building a loyal clientele who appreciated her reliability and genuine love for animals. She often walked multiple dogs at once, up to 6, maintaining control and ensuring each received individual attention. Her income supplemented her day job at a veterinary clinic, helping her support her teenage daughter. The Mountain View Estates development had been carved out of pristine mountain forest, with builders required to preserve mature trees and maintain natural wildlife corridors. But recent construction had disrupted established animal movement patterns, forcing bears, deer, and other wildlife to seek new routes through residential areas. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity, particularly as animals emerged from winter hibernation. Maria was aware of these warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals. She carried pepper spray and had received training on wildlife encounters from the local animal control office. That particular evening, she was walking 3 large dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a Golden Retriever, along the community's main street, when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Black bears are the most common bear species in North America, with adult females typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds. And mother bears with cubs are, of course, extremely protective and will attack any perceived threat to their offspring. I've seen what bears can do when they're cornered. They can run up to 35 miles per hour and possess the strength to break down doors and overturn cars. Their claws and teeth can inflict devastating injuries. I remember reading about Maria. She was walking her dogs one morning when she encountered a 300-pound black bear with 2 cubs. The bear was rummaging through garbage cans. Maria tried to back away, but her dogs started barking. The mother bear, triggered by what she perceived as a threat, charged. The bear struck Maria, driving her face into the pavement. Its jaws clamped down on her head and neck. The attack was brutal. Residents heard the commotion and called 911, but it was too late. Maria died from massive head and neck trauma. The investigation revealed that improperly secured garbage had attracted the bear. Wildlife officials relocated the bear and her cubs. The community implemented new waste management protocols. Then there's the story of Rebecca Martinez. It was October 15th, 2016, and the Georgia sun was setting over her 10-acre property. The constant barking of 40 rescue dogs echoed across the land. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her sanctuary, taking in dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch. The aggressive ones, the biters, the ones marked for euthanasia. Her recent divorce had left her financially strained and emotionally isolated, with only her dogs for company. Her neighbors had grown used to the noise, though some whispered concerns about the woman who seemed to care more about dangerous animals than her own safety. She rarely left the property anymore, moving between encloses with hands scarred from countless bites. Friends noticed she'd grown thinner, more withdrawn, speaking more about her dogs than anything else. Even the feed delivery drivers had begun leaving supplies at the gate rather than approaching the main compound. The main enclosure housed her 3 largest rescues: Rex, a 90-pound pit bull mix; Titan, an 85-pound Rottweiler cross; and Scar, a 75-pound mixed breed. What Rebecca didn't realize was that these 3 had been forming an alliance, establishing a hierarchy that put them at odds with anyone who came between them and food. The warning signs had been there for anyone trained to recognize them. The 3 dogs had begun sleeping closer together, sharing food bowls, and displaying coordinated territorial behavior when other dogs approached. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipation to something more predatory. But Rebecca was exhausted from managing 40 animals alone. I find myself often thinking about the story of Rebecca. It haunts me, how easily things can shift, how quickly trust can erode. For years, Rebecca ran an unlicensed animal rescue, a sanctuary built on good intentions in a remote corner of the countryside. She poured her heart and soul into these animals, especially 3 large dogs named Rex, Titan, and Scar. But one evening, everything changed. It had rained that afternoon, leaving the ground slick with mud. Rebecca was performing her daily feeding routine, filling buckets with kibble. The metallic clang echoed, stirring the dogs into a frenzy. She'd done this countless times, but this night felt different. As she unlatched the gate and stepped into the enclosure, her boots slipped. She stumbled, the weight of the buckets pulling her down, spilling the kibble across the wet dirt. Rex was the first to move, but something in his eyes had shifted. He no longer saw the woman who had saved him, but a competitor for resources. The attack was sudden and brutal. Rex, all 90 pounds of him, slammed into Rebecca, his jaws clamping down on her shoulder. Titan and Scar joined in, their pack instincts overwhelming years of rehabilitation. For nearly 10 minutes, the feeding frenzy raged. Her body lay undiscovered for 3 days until a delivery driver arrived. Animal control officers found the 3 dogs still in the enclosure, showing no signs of continued aggression. Rex, Titan, and Scar were euthanized, along with 12 other dogs deemed too dangerous. Rebecca's death sparked debates, leading to new regulations for animal rescues. But for those who knew her, it was too late. I remember reading about Camille Morel, a fitness instructor from Versailles. On April 3, 2017, she visited the Thor Zoo Safari Park in France, seeking a weekend of wilderness immersion. She'd booked a chalet overlooking the wolf sector, trusting the park's safety mees. Her routine was simple: a quick 2-mile jog before breakfast. The landscape was a fusion of natural calm and controlled wilderness, pine trees, and sandy trails. At dawn, the service road and inner track appeared nearly identical, a known issue in drive-through parks. Little did she know, a scheduled maintenance check had left an internal service gate near her chalet unsecured. The gate's interlock, meant to be re-engaged, had failed. Around 7 a.m., Camille stepped outside with her phone and water bottle, jogging down the gravel path. She saw no posted warnings. I'll never forget reading about Camille's last moments. The image haunted me. Surrounded, attacked, utterly defenseless. It all began with a jog. Camille, it seems, missed some warning signs. She thought the path looped back safely toward the perimeter trail. By 7:20 a.m., she was nearly half a mile in, the road dipping slightly, flanked by pines. Unknowingly, she crossed into the wolf enclosure. The wolves, fed the evening before, were still alert after a cold night. 3 of them, the dominant male and 2 others, were near the northern edge, restless from the scent of a human. From the observation tower, a zookeeper spotted her and radioed for confirmation that the route was clear. Seconds later, he realized she was inside the enclosure. He shouted into the radio, but before anyone answered, the wolves moved. At first, they didn't charge. They emerged from the trees, low to the ground, tails stiff, heads aligned. Camille slowed, confused, thinking the barrier must be nearby. But their posture shifted. She froze, turned, saw the empty gravel behind her, and started jogging back, faster this time. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated. She broke into a sprint. The zookeeper saw Camille glance back. Near a drainage trench, her foot caught on the uneven gravel, and she fell hard. Before she could get up, the lead wolf clamped down on her right thigh, pulling backward. She twisted, trying to kick free, but another wolf lunged at her shoulder. Her scream carried. The zookeeper sounded the alarm. The response vehicle was rerouted, delaying arrival to just under 10 minutes, normal for an emergency call. 2 more wolves joined, surrounding her as she tried to crawl toward the ditch. The lead wolf released and re-gripped higher, its teeth sinking into her hip. She struck out, scraping the gravel, but one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. Within moments, she was on her back, thrashing as the pack pulled from opposite sides. She kicked weakly once more, then went still. Rangers arrived within 10 minutes. They found the wolves clustered over Camille's body, heads low. Warning shots sent them scattering. Two rangers approached as another called for a tranquilizer team. Camille lay on her side, clothing torn, deep bites from shoulder to thigh. One ranger checked for a pulse and found none. They covered her with a thermal blanket and secured the area until all 5 wolves were sedated. An autopsy confirmed death by exsanguination, massive blood loss, and crushing trauma. The body was transported under escort to Versailles. That afternoon, Camille's family filed a civil lawsuit against the Zoo Safari, alleging gross negligence. After a year of investigation, the court ruled in favor of the family. The park quietly settled. Following the incident, a criminal negligence inquiry and an independent Incalo audit were conducted. Zoo Safari implemented procedural retrofits, installing interlocks and alarms that trigger if any gate remains unlatched for more than 15 seconds. It was July 22, 2016, and the Oklahoma sun beat down on the Wild Art Big Cat Sanctuary, a private facility nestled among rolling hills outside Tulsa. The 50-acre property housed over 20 rescued lions, tigers, and other exotic cats in chain-link enclosures. The afternoon air shimmered with heat as the distant sounds of roaring and pacing echoed from various habitats. Ashley Martinez, a 23-year-old college student from Dallas, had discovered the sanctuary through social media while road tripping with her boyfriend Jake. Ashley was constantly seeking unique photo opportunities, having grown up taking pictures at every family vacation. Her phone was filled with shots from cliff edges, abandoned buildings, and extreme sports activities. Ashley had grown up in suburban Dallas, developing a competitive streak that drove her to constantly push boundaries and seek attention. Her psychology major at Texas Tech had given her confidence in reading people and situations, but her academic knowledge didn't extend to understanding animal behavior. That afternoon, Ashley and Jacob paid the sanctuary's fee for a close encounter experience that promised visitors the chance to observe big cats during feeding demonstrations. The facility operated in a legal grey area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos would never permit. African lions are apex predators that retain all their wild instincts. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviours. Lions view humans as either threats or prey. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can inflict fatal wounds. I've always been struck by how easily we can misread the signals of the animal world. I remember reading about Ashley, who approached a 400-pound African lion named Caesar for a selfie. He'd been hand-raised and seemed calm enough. But what happened next was a brutal reminder that instinct can override any perceived domestication. Ashley, eager for a photo, asked her friend to distract the sanctuary owner. She climbed over the barrier, approaching Caesar, who was resting just 10 feet away. At first, he seemed unbothered, his golden eyes following her movements. But as Ashley moved closer, Caesar's demeanor shifted. His ears flattened, his tail twitched, subtle signs that she, in that moment, was unable to interpret. The attack was sudden, explosive. Millions of years of predatory programming kicked in the moment Ashley adjusted her pose. Caesar launched himself, covering the distance in a single bound. Her phone flew from her hand as his paws struck her chest. His claws tore into her torso and shoulders, and his jaws clamped down on her neck. The sanctuary owner came running at the sound of screams, but it was too late. Ashley's movements ceased within minutes. The investigation revealed the facility had been operating without proper permits and insurance. Caesar was relocated, but Ashley's story serves as a tragic warning. Then there's the story of Giovanni Russo, an alpine guide in northern Italy. He respected the balance between humans and wildlife, even priding himself on leading treks that minimized disturbance to the environment. Wolves had returned to the Grand Paradiso region after decades of absence. And Giovanni wasn't afraid. He believed predators avoided people. One night, a careless mistake, an unsealed food bag near the cooking area, altered that balance. Just before dawn, Eleanor, his wife, woke to rustling and a faint growl. Giovanni grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside to investigate. He found 3 wolves near the food, and when he shouted and stepped forward, one lunged. The bite struck deep, severing tissue. He fell backward, blood pulsing from his injuries. Eleanor tore from the tent with a burning stick, but the damage was done. I've read accounts of animal attacks that leave me cold, but others linger in my mind for days. I think about the sheer force of nature unleashed, the suddenness of it all. There's one case, a tragedy really, where a man named Giovanni was killed by wolves. He was on a guided tour, and it seems the wolves were drawn in by unsecured food. The clients, huddled in their shelter, watched in horror as Giovanni collapsed, a pool of blood spreading around his neck. Eleanor, in a moment of desperate courage, swung a torch, hitting one of the younger wolves. It yelped, and the pack scattered. She knelt beside Giovanni, whispering his name, but it was too late. He was gone. Because the signal was weak at that altitude, someone had to climb a nearby slope to get through to park emergency services. Rangers arrived before sunrise. They found Giovanni's body, partly covered by his wife's jacket. His face was untouched, but the left side of his neck showed the terrible extent of the crushing injuries. Investigators later concluded that the fatal wound likely happened when Giovanni twisted as the wolf held his arm. It caused a freak tear along an artery, leading to almost instant collapse. Officials ruled it a food-provoked escalation involving juvenile wolves. A short monitoring program followed, but no culling was ordered. The pack didn't show any further aggression toward humans. Giovanni's funeral was held 5 days later. Then there's the story of the Lawson family. On July 15th, 2016, they arrived at Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India. I can only imagine the scene. A vast mangrove delta stretching out before them, a maze of tidal channels and dense vegetation, where the Ganges meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rising from the brackish water, their aerial roots creating an impenetrable network. This UNESCO World Heritage Site It harbors one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems. Saltwater crocodiles lurk beneath the surface, and venomous snakes coil in the canopy above. Genevieve Lawson, a 42-year-old real estate agent from London, had booked the most expensive boat tour. She was known for being demanding and unwilling to accept limitations. She'd already berated Ravi, their local guide, multiple times during the morning briefing. Her husband, David, a 45-year-old investment banker, tried to calm her down, but it was no use. Their teenage children, Emma and Jake, watched uncomfortably as their mother dismissed every safety warning, calling it unnecessary fear-mongering designed to limit their premium experience. Ravi, despite his 15 years of experience guiding in those treacherous waters, felt intimidated by her threats of negative reviews and her demands for closer encounters with wildlife. The motorboat was equipped with safety barriers meant to keep tourists safe from the apex predators that ruled the area. But Genevieve saw these precautions as obstacles, preventing her from capturing the authentic jungle photographs she wanted. The Sundarbans mangroves are the exclusive hunting ground for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers. These aren't just any tigers. They're apex predators that have uniquely adapted to this aquatic environment. Unlike their mainland cousins, these tigers are exceptional swimmers and have developed a willingness to hunt humans in the water. They can weigh up to 400 pounds and mere over 10 feet in length. Their 4-inch canine teeth can crush windpipes and deliver fatal wounds in seconds. Their orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of the mangrove forest, making them practically invisible as they move silently through the water. During the afternoon tour, the boat approached a narrow channel where Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He immediately cut the engine and whispered for complete silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his urgent warnings to stay in the boat, Genevieve became frustrated with the distance. She declared that she needed closer photographs. Against the protests of her family and guide, Genevieve stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep water of the channel. The murky tidal water concealed her movements as she waded toward the mangrove shoreline, camera held high above her head. Unbeknownst to the group, a massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream. It had detected the boat's engine minutes earlier. Sundarban tigers are ambush predators that use water as their primary hunting ground, approaching prey silently while swimming. This particular male had killed humans before and recognized the splashing sounds of vulnerable prey entering his territory. The tiger slipped into the water upstream and began swimming toward Genevieve, with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. When Genevieve reached the muddy shoreline and began photographing the tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching predator. The tiger closed the final 20 feet underwater, using its powerful limbs to propel itself through the murky channel with deadly precision. The attack erupted from the water with explosive violence. The massive tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and immediately clamped its powerful jaws around her throat from behind. The 4-inch canine teeth punctured through her neck muscles and crushed her windpipe with over 1,000 pounds of bite force. The tiger's killing technique involves suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the massive prez instantly collapsed her airway. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive internal bleeding. The predator's powerful forelimbs wrapped around her torso, while its hind legs found purchase on her lower body, holding her in an inescapable grip. The tiger then began its drowning technique, pulling her backward into deeper water while maintaining its cruel hold. I find myself haunted by the image of Genevieve, held underwater in the mangroves, the tiger's crushing bite, the severed arteries. Death came quickly, but not painlessly. I can only imagine her terror in those final moments. It was November 15th, 2016, in the remote forests of Primorsky Krai, eastern Russia. Snow fell, muffling the usual sounds. Nikolai Baronov, a 52-year-old forestry worker, was out on patrol. His last radio check-in was brief and routine, giving no indication of the tragedy to come. He spent most of his life in those forests, monitoring traps, logging boundaries, and poaching activity. He lived alone near Dalna, his life attuned to the rhythms of the wild. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve, responding to reports of wolves encroaching on villages. He rode out on his snowmobile before dawn, carrying only essentials. His colleagues said he preferred working alone, believing a second engine scared off wildlife. His task was simple: document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves had become increasingly active, driven from higher ground by a decline in wild boar numbers. They could travel up to 20 miles in a single night. Locals had warned of animals following sled trails at dusk, warnings Nikolai heard but dismissed. He checked his flare gun but left his rifle behind, citing its weight. By noon, the weather shifted, bringing heavy snow and reduced visibility. His supervisor's radio attempts went unanswered. When evening arrived and Nikolai hadn't returned, Yevgen, a neighboring ranger and longtime friend, set out to follow his route. Around 5 p.m., Yevgen found Nikolai's snowmobile, half buried in snow. Tracks showed Nikolai had dismounted. Then another pattern emerged: paw prints, deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines. The circle tightened. Yevgen later described it as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. A snapped branch, a torn glove, a smear of blood on the snowmobile. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down. Wolves and man. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray indicated arterial injury. The attack was coordinated. His jacket was shredded along the spine. Boot prints ended, replaced by drag marks. Yevgen found the body 30 meters downhill, near a frozen stream. The snow was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. The surrounding prints showed at least 4 individuals: 2 adults, 2 juveniles. It took nearly an hour for a rescue vehicle to arrive. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns. The stench of blood lingered, even in the cold. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dalna. The autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss and crushing trauma to the neck. The official report cited predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted the unusual decline in prey density that year. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. Then there was Walt Kowalski. There are creatures on this earth that have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Perfectly adapted ambush hunters, lurking in aquatic environments. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds. Their jaw muscles capable of exerting over 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. I find it both terrifying and awe-inspiring. I remember reading about a man named Walt who moved to Florida after selling his plumbing business. He was drawn there by the promise of year-round golf, fishing, and outdoor living, something that had been impossible during Ohio's harsh winters. He purchased a modest ranch home with direct water access, complete with a private dock where he could fish and feed the ducks, regular visitors to his backyard. Walt's evening routine typically involved sitting on his patio with a cold beer, watching the sunset reflect off the calm water, while tossing breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. The Sunset Lakes community had been built on reclaimed wetlands, the developers creating an elaborate system of retention ponds and canals to manage stormwater runoff, while providing attractive water features for residents. These artificial waterways were connected to natural creek systems that flowed into Tampa Bay, creating corridors that allowed wildlife to move freely between developed and undeveloped areas. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels throughout the region, bringing increased wildlife activity to residential areas. Walt had noticed more alligators in the community's waters over the past few months, but like most Florida residents, he had learned to coexist with the reptiles as a normal part of life in the state. Walt's regular duck feeding had created a reliable food source that attracted waterfowl from throughout the area. Alligators, as apex predators, are opportunistic feeders that will consume any animal they can overpower, including birds, fish, mammals, and occasionally humans who venture too close to their territory. That evening, Walt had been relaxing on his patio when he noticed that his favorite fishing lure had become tangled in the vegetation near his dock. Walt waded into the knee-deep water near his dock, using a long-handled net to try to free the snagged lure from the underwater vegetation. He had performed similar retrievals many times over the past 5 years without incident, confident that the shallow water near his property was safe for brief wading. The attack came from directly beneath Walt as he stood in the canal, focused on retrieving his lure. A 12-foot male alligator, which had been submerged motionless near the dock for over an hour, waiting for ducks to approach the feeding area, exploded upward with devastating force. The massive reptile's jaws clamped down on Walt's right leg with bone-crushing power, its 3,000 pounds of bite press instantly fracturing the femur and severing major arteries. The alligator immediately initiated its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its grip on Walt's leg. The violent rotation dislocated Walt's hip and pulled him fully into the canal, where the gator's natural advantages became overwhelming. The 12-foot alligator dragged Walt toward the deeper center of the canal, where its superior swimming ability and underwater endurance made escape impossible. Within minutes, Walt's movement ceased as drowning and massive blood loss overwhelmed his system. Emergency responders arrived within 10 minutes of Margaret's call, but the alligator had already retreated to the deeper water with Walt's body. Police and wildlife officers worked through the night to locate and capture the massive reptile, using specialized equipment and trained personnel to safely extract both the alligator and Walt's remains from the canal. The investigation revealed that Walt's regular duck feeding had inadvertently attracted the large alligator to his property, creating a dangerous situation that culminated in the fatal attack. Walt's death prompted immediate changes to the Sunset Lakes community's water safety protocols, including the installation of warning signs around all retention ponds and canals. It was September 8, 2014. The vast wetlands of the Florida Everglades stretched endlessly under the blazing afternoon sun, their sawgrass prairies and cypress swamps teeming with some of America's most dangerous wildlife. The remote waterways near Tamiami Trail buzzed with the activity of airboat tours, carrying tourists deep into alligator territory, where massive reptiles basked on mudbanks and hunted in the dark water channels. Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle, was experiencing his first visit to Florida as part of a cross-country road trip he was taking to celebrate his recent promotion. Michael had always been fascinated by technology and outdoor adventure, spending his weekends hiking in the Pacific Northwest Mountains. His engineering background had given him confidence in analyzing risks and solving problems, but his experience with dangerous wildlife was limited to black bears and mountain lions that could be avoided through proper precautions. Michael had grown up in urban Seattle, developing his love of nature through weekend camping trips with his father and uncle. His methodical approach to problem-solving had made him successful in his career, but it had also given him perhaps too much confidence in his ability to assess and manage dangerous situations. Michael enjoyed taking photos of his travels to share with his family and friends back home. That afternoon, Michael had joined a small group airboat tour that promised close encounters with alligators and other Everglades wildlife. The tour guide, a weathered Floridian with decades of swamp experience, had repeatedly warned passengers to remain seated and keep hands inside the boat at all times. Alligators. They're perfectly adapted as ambush hunters. Adult males can reach 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their jaws can exert over 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. And they can launch themselves partially out of the water with explosive force. I've read accounts of how they view any movement near their territory as either prey or a threat. I remember reading about a tragedy that occurred on an airboat tour. It had been progressing smoothly for nearly an hour when the guide spotted a massive alligator sunning itself on a mudbank, only about 20 feet away. This reptile was exceptional, easily 12 feet long and weighing over 800 pounds, its prehistoric form perfectly still in the afternoon heat. One of the passengers, a man named Michael began photographing the magnificent predator, excited to capture images of such an impressive wild animal to show his colleagues. But his enthusiasm quickly overcame his caution as he leaned farther over the boat's edge to get closer shots. Then the fatal moment came. Michael's phone slipped from his grip and began falling toward the dark water. Without thinking, Michael lunged forward, extending his body over the side of the airboat, desperately trying to catch his expensive device before it disappeared into the swamp. The massive alligator had been monitoring the boat with predatory patience, and Michael's sudden movement triggered its attack immediately. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed, its powerful tail propelling it through the water like a missile, aimed directly at Michael's exposed position. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force, its 3,000 pounds of bite press instantly shattering bones and severing major arteries. Michael's scream of shock and pain echoed across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him completely over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and other passengers grabbed desperately at Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat, while the massive alligator maintained its crushing grip on his arm. The alligator immediately began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its devastating grip. Michael's struggles grew weaker as the combination of massive blood loss, crushing injuries, and drowning overwhelmed his body. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing additional trauma while ensuring its prey could not escape. Within minutes, Michael's movement ceased as the alligator's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, where it disappeared beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body was not recovered until the following day, when wildlife officials located the massive alligator and retrieved the remains. The tour company immediately implemented physical barriers around all passenger seating areas and enhanced safety briefings for future tours. Michael's death prompted his family to advocate for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident highlighted the deadly consequences of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators and became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing photography over personal safety. It was July 8, 2017. I remember reading about another tragedy that day. The Detroit summer heat shimmered off abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she'd been spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals that had never known human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group concerned her the most. 6 dogs, led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others. But Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always maintaining a safe distance. But tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than the food. What she didn't realize was that pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. Behind him came the others, a scarred pit bull mix, 2 smaller dogs, and 3 newcomers whose breeds were impossible to determine. Their eyes reflected the dim streetlight like mirrors. Maria began distributing food as always, tossing handfuls of kibble in different directions to prevent fighting. But tonight, the strategy backfired. Instead of dispersing to eat, the dogs began to circle. I've seen what happens when pack instincts take over, when the wild comes to the surface. It's a chilling thing to witness, even from a distance. I remember reading about Maria, who made the fatal mistake of stepping between fighting dogs. Despite rehabilitation, they retained all the instincts and power of their wild counterparts. Chimpanzees are incredibly strong, 5 times stronger than an adult human. Males can weigh 150 pounds, stand over 4 feet tall, and their grip strength can crush bones. Their canine teeth are over 2 inches long, designed for defense and dominance. During the tour, Kendra grew frustrated with the viewing restrictions. She wanted access to the maintenance areas, where staff entered the enclose. Dr. Mukasa refused, citing the extreme danger. But while the group watched chimps in a distant enclose, Kendra noticed an unlocked gate leading to a maintenance corridor. Despite the explicit warnings, she slipped away, confident in her animal handling skills. The maintenance area brought her within reach of Bosso, the sanctuary's dominant male. He weighed 150 pounds and had been rescued as an infant 15 years earlier. He was known to be aggressive towards unfamiliar humans. As Kendra approached the barrier and raised her camera, Bosso saw it as a challenge. He lunged, grabbing her arm with crushing force. His grip strength. I've read about chimpanzee attacks, but one case always haunts me. A chimpanzee named Bosso, with canine teeth over 2 inches long and razor sharp, attacked a woman named Kendra. The force of his bite was measured at 1,300 pounds per square inch. That's enough to immediately fracture bone. Using his immense strength, Bosso pulled her against the barrier. Chimpanzees, I learned, instinctively target faces, hands, and genitals during attacks, maximizing damage. Bosso's teeth tore into Kendra's face and neck. His hands ripped at her clothing, his feet kicking at her torso. The attack lasted nearly 2 minutes. His jaws crushed her facial bones, tearing away skin and muscle. Major blood vessels in her neck were severed. Her attempts to defend herself were useless against his overwhelming strength. Her free hand was mutilated, several fingers crushed. The coordinated nature of the attack left no chance of escape. Another man, Peter, heard Kendra's screams and rushed to help, using high-press water hoses to drive Bozo away after almost 2 minutes. But by then, Kendra had suffered catastrophic injuries. The massive blood loss and shock proved fatal within minutes. She died before emergency services could reach her. The investigation that followed focused on security failures. Her family filed lawsuits. It was February the 9th, 2014, near Langer, Saskatchewan. The morning light filtered slowly through the northern boreal forest. For 2 men setting out that day, it seemed like another routine trip into familiar woods. David Lasky, a 45-year-old part-time wildlife photographer, lived just outside Prince Albert. He'd spent years tracking animal behavior, learning to move silently and read patterns in the snow. His cousin Jeff, 42, often joined him on winter runs to retrieve SD cards from trail cameras. That weekend, after a light snowfall, late-season hunger had made local deer scarce, and David wanted to check a set of cameras he'd left by a frozen creek north of Waskew Lake. They'd heard distant howls before, but never close. David believed wolves avoided humans by instinct. The plan was simple: a 2-hour ride by snowmobile, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. Wolves in the region were typically grey, thick-coated animals averaging about 90 pounds. They moved in tight family groups of 4 to 8. Their strength lay in coordination, silent pursuit, strategic circling, and patience rather than outright speed. Under normal conditions, they avoided people entirely, focusing on deer and moose along the forest edges. The men dressed in insulated gear and carried only a single red flare for safety. By 9:30 a.m., they parked their snowmobile near the creek and began walking the last half-mile through packed snow, their breath hanging in the still air. At first, everything was normal. They reached the first camera, brushed off the lens, and swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as they crossed the creek, Jeff's boot slipped on a patch of ice. David crouched to help him up, steadying his cousin by the arm. That was when both noticed faint movement among the tree line across the creek. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching light. Jeff straightened and waved his arms, shouting to scare them off. The wolves didn't run. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back momentarily, circling just out of reach. David slumped sideways. I find myself returning to the stark image of wolf tracks surrounding a site in a broad ring, drag marks leading back toward the tree line. It's a scene that speaks of desperation, of a primal struggle played out in a landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. The official report listed the cause of death as exsanguination from femoral artery trauma, consistent with large animal bites. Jeff, breath shallow, had swung the flare, its hiss forcing the wolves to hesitate. He pressed on his cousin's wound, but it was too deep. Within a minute, the movement stopped. He pulled David's camera bag close and used his phone to call for help. Reception cut in and out, but a faint intermittent signal reached a nearby ranger station. Authorities arrived about 40 minutes later by snowmobile to find Jeff sitting beside the body, shaking uncontrollably. Provincial conservation officers, assisted by federal wildlife agents, closed the area within the hour. Samples were taken from bite margins for DNA analysis, and the implicated pack was later trapped and relocated to a remote management zone north of Reindeer Lake. Wildlife biologists suggested the wolves had been defending a food cache, not actively hunting, but the distinction mattered little to those who saw the aftermath. Then, just a few weeks later, on December 9, 2018, in Canyon Vista, a suburban Los Angeles community, a very different tragedy unfolded. The hillside development, where urban sprawl met the wild chaparral of the Santa Monica Mountains, was experiencing an unusually warm winter evening. Kevin Chen, a 16-year-old high school junior and varsity basketball player, was running late after practice. He decided to take his usual shortcut through an undeveloped lot, rather than follow the longer route along the main road. He was an honor student and star athlete, earning recognition as one of his school's most promising college prospects. He lived with his parents and younger sister in a modern home that backed up against the natural open space that made Canyon Vista such a desirable address. Kevin often used the informal trails and vacant lots to move quickly between his home and school, a practice that had never caused any problems during his 4 years in the neighborhood. The Canyon Vista area had been experiencing increased wildlife activity, following a series of devastating wildfires that had burned thousands of acres in the surrounding mountains. The fires had displaced numerous predators, forcing them to seek new territory and food sources in areas they had previously avoided. Local authorities had issued warnings about mountain lion sightings in residential areas, but most residents viewed these as routine precautions rather than serious threats. Kevin was aware of the wildlife warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during his frequent use of the neighborhood's informal trail system. He carried his basketball gear in a backpack and typically moved quickly through the undeveloped areas, confident that his familiarity with the terrain and his athletic ability would keep him safe from any potential threats. Mountain lions are solitary predators that require large territories to support their hunting needs, with adult males controlling ranges of up to 100 square miles. Juvenile males are particularly dangerous as they establish new territories, often displaying more aggressive behavior than experienced adults. These young cats are less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, including domestic animals and occasionally humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth and can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80 lb juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground for domestic cats and small dogs that wandered from nearby homes. The young cat had been displaced from his natal territory by an older, more dominant male, and was desperately seeking to establish new hunting grounds that could support his survival. The mountain lion had been stalking Kevin for several hundred yards, moving silently through the dense brush while staying downwind to avoid detection. The cat's hunting instincts were triggered by Kevin's size, movement pattern, and the fact that he was alone and vulnerable in the predator's newly claimed territory. The attack came from behind as Kevin navigated through a particularly dense section of chaparral. The 80 lb mountain lion launched himself from the brush with explosive force, his powerful hind legs propelling him through the air to land squarely on Kevin's back. The impact drove Kevin face first into the rocky ground, while the cat's claws found purchase in his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Kevin's neck, his 4 canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae, while his bite force targeted the spinal cord. Kevin's attempts to fight back with his backpack proved futile against the cat's superior strength and positioning. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Kevin's shoulders and torso, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss. Kevin's screams for help echoed through the hillside community, alerting residents in nearby homes to the emergency unfolding in the vacant lot. Several homeowners called 911 while attempting to locate the source of the disturbance, but the dense vegetation made it difficult to pinpoint Kevin's exact location. The mountain lion continued his attack for several minutes, driven by predatory instincts and the stress of establishing new territory. Police and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes of the first 911 call, using Kevin's continued cries for help to locate him in the brush. There are places where wealthy people will pay a shocking amount of money for a photo with a dangerous predator. I've read about them, of course. These private facilities operating in the shadows of legitimate conservation. They offer interactions that accredited zoos would never permit. One such place was the Lone Star Exotic Ranch, 300 acres in East Texas. It was November 3rd, 2015. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across custom-built enclosures, housing tigers, lions, and other big cats acquired, as I said, through questionable channels. I recently read about a mountain lion attack that led to a man's death. Kevin was airlifted to a trauma center, but died from massive blood loss and spinal injuries during emergency surgery. The investigation revealed that the juvenile mountain lion had been displaced by recent wildfires and was attempting to establish new territory in the residential area. Wildlife officers tracked and euthanized the cat the following day, determining that his aggressive behavior toward humans made him unsuitable for relocation. On that day in November, a 27-year-old personal trainer from Houston named Brandon Walsh had discovered the ranch through word-of-mouth recommendations. Brandon was passionate about fitness and adventure, always seeking new challenges to test his limits. He'd saved for months to afford this experience, viewing it as the ultimate test of his courage and confidence around dangerous animals. Brandon had built his business through dedication, helping clients overcome their fears. His confident personality had made him popular, though perhaps his success made him overconfident about his ability to handle any dangerous situation. That afternoon, Brandon paid the rancher's fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300-pound female Bengal tiger who had been hand-raised from a cub. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer, supervised, emphasizing the extreme dangers involved. Bengal tigers are powerful predators. Adult females can weigh up to 350 pounds, possessing incredible strength, speed, and hunting instincts, regardless of human contact. They're solitary, territorial animals that become extremely aggressive when their space is violated. Their jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The session began with Brandon outside Sasha's enclos, capturing shots of himself posed near the tiger, with the barrier between them. But Brandon quickly became frustrated, believing he needed closer contact for the dramatic photos he envisioned. He convinced the ranch owner to allow him closer access, arguing that his conditioning and confident energy would keep the tiger calm. Against his better judgment, the owner agreed to let Brandon enter a smaller holding area adjacent to Sasha's main enclos. The holding area was separated from Sasha's territory by only a chain-link barrier, bringing Brandon within arm's reach of the tiger. Brandon began posing for his camera, which was mounted on a tripod. His fatal mistake was crouching down next to the barrier and extending his hand towards Sasha, believing that his demeanor would demonstrate his dominance. The tiger's ears flattened, and her tail began twitching. Sasha's attack was swift. The moment Brandon moved suddenly to adjust his pose, the tiger's hunting instincts activated. Sasha launched herself at the barrier with tremendous power, her paws striking the chain-link fencing while her claws found purchase on Brandon's arm. The tiger's strength pulled Brandon against the barrier, and her jaws snapped at him through the fencing. The tiger's claws raked across Brandon's arm and shoulder, opening deep gashes that immediately began bleeding, while her grip prevented any retreat. The ranch owner rushed to intervene, using emergency protocols to distract Sasha and force her to release her grip. But the tiger's claws had already caused catastrophic damage, severing major arteries and causing massive blood loss. Brandon collapsed from shock and blood loss within minutes of the attack, his physical conditioning proving useless against injuries that no human could survive. There's a photo I can't shake from my mind. A fitness model named Brandon, posing with a tiger. It was supposed to be an artistic statement, a celebration of strength and beauty. Instead, it became a tragedy. The tiger, Sasha, fatally mauled him. The investigation that followed revealed a disturbing lack of oversight, a facility operating outside the bounds of safety, and a stark reminder of the inherent risks of using wild animals as props. Sasha was eventually moved to a proper sanctuary, and the facility was shut down. But Brandon's story serves as a cautionary tale, a somber lesson etched in blood. And then there was Tommy Rodriguez. August 19th, 2013. The Missouri heat, thick and heavy, seemed to amplify the stench of neglect that clung to his property. He was running an illegal puppy mill, and desperation had led him to cut corners, fatal corners. His 20-acre property was a grim labyrinth of makeshift kennels, housing nearly 80 dogs. But the real security came from 4 massive guard dogs patrolling the perimeter. 2 cane corsos and 2 mastiff mixes, all trained for aggression, all weapons. The financial press had been mounting for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, and facility maintenance were eating into his profits. He started cutting back, even on the guard dog's food. And a hungry guard dog, I've learned, is far more dangerous than a well-fed one. Hunger sharpened their instincts. made them territorial, and eroded their tolerance for humans. The dogs had been showing signs of increased aggression for weeks, but Tommy was too distracted to notice. On that sweltering August night, he made his final rounds, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the countryside was silent save for the distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod, but his mind was on finances, not the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy with a sick litter. Their hunger had reached a breaking point. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for a meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept them without taking precautions. Usually, he would have fed them first, but exhaustion had made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain with nothing but a flashlight and a false sense of security. The attack began with Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerging from the shadows. His 125-pound frame moved with surprising silence, his head lowered in a hunting posture. Behind him came the others, Titan, Rex, and Scar. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into the darkness as he screamed for help that would never come. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts fully engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, crushing bone. Titan went for the torso, tearing through clothing and flesh. Scar circled, darting in to bite and retreat. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators, disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, with the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. Tommy's end was a gruesome one. It's a scene that still haunts me when I think about it. His body, broken and partially consumed, lay in the dirt, a testament to the very animals he sought to control. The dogs, driven by hunger, had turned on their master. For 3 weeks, his remains went undiscovered, a feast for the creatures he had exploited. The other dogs, trapped and starving, met a slower, agonizing end. The stench of death eventually led authorities to the property, revealing a horror show of unimaginable proportions. Tommy's remains were scattered. Dozens of dogs lay dead or dying in makeshift kennels. The surviving guard dogs, aggressive and dangerous, were shot on sight. The investigation unveiled the full scope of Tommy's illegal operation: breeding females in deplorable conditions, puppies succumbing to disease, and financial records that exposed his sales of sick animals across state lines. The surviving dogs, too far gone, were euthanized. Tommy's death marked the end of a large puppy mill, but the cost was far greater than just his own life. He became a victim of the desperation he fueled in those animals, their hunger turning them into what he tried to make them. Then, on August 22, 2014, in the exclusive Cypress Point community bordering the Florida Everglades, a landscaper named Roberto Mendez was simply trying to make an honest living. The gated community, built on reclaimed wetlands, was a symbol of luxury in South Florida. Roberto, a 35-year-old small business owner, worked tirelessly to maintain its pristine grounds. He had built his landscaping company from the ground up, and he took great pride in his work, supporting his wife and 2 young children through long hours in the Florida heat. Cypress Point, with its elaborate system of decorative ponds and waterways, was connected to the natural Everglades. These artificial lakes were filled with ornamental fish and surrounded by lush landscaping that demanded constant care. Heavy rains had recently caused water levels to rise, encouraging wildlife to move between natural and man-made water systems. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife, and he respected the dangers they posed, always checking water features before getting too close. On that afternoon, he was trimming bushes around a small ornamental pond when his hedge trimmer slipped from his hands and fell into the shallow water. He likely thought little of it at the time. American alligators are masters of ambush, capable of remaining motionless for hours. A female can reach 8 to 10 feet in length and weigh up to 200 pounds, possessing incredible speed and power. They are most dangerous when protecting their nests or when surprised. Their bite force is over 2,000 pounds per square inch, and their infamous death roll is designed to disorient and drown prey. Roberto waded into the knee-deep pond to retrieve his trimmer, assuming it was safe. It appeared peaceful, well-maintained, with no signs of wildlife. He had worked around similar ponds hundreds of times without incident. But the attack came the instant his feet touched the muddy bottom. A 10-foot female alligator, hidden among the vegetation, erupted into action, her powerful jaws clamping down on Roberto's right leg. The bite shattered his tibia and fibula, severing major arteries and tearing through muscle. She berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as she screamed at the crew for their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, a man with 18 years of experience, had dealt with difficult clients before. But Tara's aggressive behavior and lack of empathy alarmed him. She demanded the protective cage be removed, claiming she deserved unrestricted access to the sharks. When Dr. Chen tried to explain the dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee, jealous of successful people. She believed her graduate student status and booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation and file lawsuits if she didn't get her extreme experience. She even suggested the crew members should enter the water first to test the sharks. The waters around Neptune Islands are home to some of the largest great white sharks on Earth, apex predators that have ruled these seas for over 400 million years. These magnificent hunters can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds. Their massive triangular heads house rows of razor-sharp serrated teeth, each measuring up to 3 inches long, designed to slice through flesh and bone. Great whites possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing press. The crew had attracted several great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among them was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds, aggressively feeding on the bait. This enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviours, circling the boat with calculated precision, investigating the steel diving cage. Before entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to fake an equipment malfunctions to justify exiting the cage. She believed she could manipulate the situations to get the shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing press. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch shattered Tara's rib cage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying press while its head thrashed violently from side to side, the signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist, separating her upper and lower torso. Earlier that same year, another fatal encounter with an alligator serves as a stark reminder that nature operates by its own rules, indifferent to our desires or expectations. Roberto, while working in Cypress Point, met a similar fate. Just in time to witness the final moments of the attack, the alligator had dragged Roberto into the deepest part of the pond, where his attempts to reach the surface for air were thwarted by the reptile's continued grip and rolling motion. Roberto drowned within minutes as the massive blood loss and trauma overwhelmed his system. Emergency responders arrived within 15 minutes of the homeowner's 911 call, but Roberto had already succumbed to his injuries. Wildlife officers worked for several hours to safely capture the 10-FD female alligator, which had retreated to the pond's vegetation. After completing her attack, the reptile was relocated to a remote area of the Everglades, away from human populations. The investigation revealed that the ornamental pond's connection to natural waterways had allowed the large alligator to enter the residential area undetected. Roberto's death prompted immediate changes to Cypress Point's water feature management, including the installation of barriers between decorative ponds and natural drainage systems and new safety protocols for maintenance workers. I've often thought about how thin the line is between our expectations and the raw power of the natural world. Sometimes that line breaks with devastating consequences. I remember reading about a woman named Tara, who believed her money and demands could override the behavior of a shark during a cage diving experience. She deliberately sabotaged equipment and violated safety protocols. The investigation revealed it all, and the end came swiftly. Tara died within seconds from massive blood loss, traumatic shock, and the destruction of vital organs as a shark consumed portions of her body before disappearing into the depths. Later, her family filed lawsuits, displaying, it was said, the same sense of entitlement that had led to her death. The incident led to stricter regulations for shark cage diving, a grim legacy. Then there was Harold Thompson on March 22, 2015. The Alabama sun beat down on his property, where the barking of dogs echoed from kennels scattered across 5 acres of red dirt. At 71, Hank, as he was known, moved slowly between the enclos, carrying water with the confidence that came from 20 years of dog breeding. He and his wife, Martha, had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What had started as a hobby had grown into a modest business, with 8 breeding females and 3 males, producing litters they sold across the southeast. But age, it seemed, had made Hank careless about safety protocols. In his younger days, he never would have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during territorial phases. He'd seen what these dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler whose massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime, with a bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices from buyers seeking protection animals. Recently, however, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable, causing him to snap at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha had expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes, but Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy and believed their bond was unbreakable. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling, work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, the dog's dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. The animal was panting heavily, despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times, but today, Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog. Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, No warning. Just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instincts spread into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels, but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operation was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. Then I recall another case, this one from September 3rd, 2013, near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly. But the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. She was known for her I've always found it unsettling how quickly an ordinary day in the wilderness can turn into something else entirely. The case of Sarah came to mind recently. She was an experienced hiker, the kind who favored a minimalist approach. She carried only what she trusted, relying more on skill than gear. Her plan that week in Denali was a 2-day loop near the Tlat River, timed perfectly to coincide with the caribou migration. It was a route where wolves were often observed trailing the herds. She had bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough food for 2 nights. Solo travel didn't intimidate her. She'd been doing it for years, documenting her routes for small hiking blogs. She had properly filed for the required Denali backcountry permits. Rangers later recalled she'd inquired about late-season wolf movements, but showed no concern when told sightings had increased near the river corridor. Wolves had been following caribou herds migrating south, and fresh tracks had been noted just days earlier. But to Sarah, it was just part of the environment, one she respected but didn't fear. The wolves in that region averaged between 70 and 100 pounds. They were built for endurance and speed, capable of covering 40 miles in a day. Their jaws delivered a bite force of nearly 400 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bone. But they rarely approached people, living primarily on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. Yet, when prey grew scarce, or human scent carried traces of food, curiosity sometimes lingered. That week, rangers had posted advisories near trailheads, noting that several hikers reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah had likely read those postings when she signed out, though no record showed she changed her route. Her confidence in her precautions was understandable. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4 p.m., a passing tourist group in a vehicle on the park road spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. The hiker waved, later confirmed by clothing and timing to be Sarah, before continuing upstream toward the area where her camp was located. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. The last photos on her recovered camera showed wide shots of the river valley and a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the mid-distance. Tracks found later indicated she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, likely planning to cut inland. The first sign of struggle began about half a mile from her tent. Her GPS unit recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators reconstructed what happened next through physical evidence and predator behavior analysis. The wolves had diverted toward her position once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them at a distance, as she deployed her bear spray once. Residue was detected on nearby vegetation. Wind readings that afternoon showed a westward shift, causing partial blowback of the spray mist. It worked briefly, driving the wolves about 20 feet back before the cloud dispersed. They began to circle again, emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One flank of the group approached from behind, following her retreat up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf had likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay spent beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip. The kind wolves used to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve recovered 20 feet away still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night, with both ground crews and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noted her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. They collected the camera and other items for analysis, and later confirmed through timestamps that her final photograph was taken just 6 minutes before the estimated time of death. The park temporarily closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Talat pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally, but with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed. No removals were ordered. At a private debrief, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. It was April 14, 2018, when Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways that served as home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, had immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. Despite his attempts to maintain group cohesion, Monica broke away from the guided tour and paddled her kayak toward a restricted lagoon clearly marked with multiple warning signs. She was determined to investigate what appeared to be interesting wildlife activity, claiming she had every right, as a tax-paying citizen, to explore any area of the national park. The restricted lagoon was a primary nesting area for a massive 12-foot bull alligator that had been actively defending his territory for 3 weeks. The 800-pound reptile had established his dominance and had already driven off several smaller males. The presence of Monica's kayak immediately triggered the alligator's most aggressive defensive instincts. The bull alligator detected the vibrations from Monica's paddle strokes within seconds. The massive reptile had been resting motionless beneath the surface, perfectly camouflaged among the submerged vegetation. The alligator's attack was swift and devastating. The 800-pound predator launched itself from the water with explosive force, its massive jaws clamping down on the front section of Monica's kayak. The impact capsized her kayak instantly, throwing her into the murky water directly in front of the enraged reptile. As Monica struggled in the water, disoriented and panicked, the alligator immediately identified her as a threat to his nesting territory. The massive reptile's jaws found purchase on Monica's torso, his razor-sharp teeth puncturing through her life jacket and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force shattered multiple ribs instantly while puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels. The alligator then began its signature killing technique known as the death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive internal trauma. The 800-pound reptile rotated rapidly in the water, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its crushing grip. The violent rotation generated a tremendous force that tore muscles and caused catastrophic internal injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute as the alligator spun through the water with Monica trapped in its jaws. The violent motion filled her punctured lungs with water, while the crushing prise prevented any possibility of breathing. Her shattered ribs were ground against each other, causing additional internal bleeding. The combination of massive internal trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within 2 minutes. Monica's struggles gradually ceased as the alligator continued its death roll. The massive reptile eventually released her lifeless body, which floated to the surface. Tommy Rodriguez immediately radioed for emergency assistance, but rescue teams were unable to reach the remote lagoon in time. Then, there's the story of Sarah Johnson. It was May 14th, 2017, and the ancient mountains of Great Smoky Mountains National Park rose majestically above the Tennessee landscape, their peaks shrouded in the characteristic mist that gave the range its name. The late spring afternoon was perfect for hiking, with golden sunlight filtering through the dense canopy of oak, maple, and hickory trees, while wildflowers carpeted the forest floor in brilliant colors. Sarah, a 29-year-old registered nurse from Atlanta, was enjoying a weekend hiking trip with her fiancé Tom, exploring the park's extensive trail system while taking photos to commemorate their engagement celebration. She had always loved nature photography, carrying her camera on every outdoor adventure to capture memories of their time together. Her medical background had given her a practical understanding of emergency situations, but her experience with dangerous wildlife was limited. Sarah had been hiking throughout the Southeast for over 5 years, building her confidence and wilderness skills through countless weekend adventures with Tom. She worked long shifts at Grady Hospital's emergency department, and these mountain getaways provided essential stress relief from her demanding career-saving lives in one of Atlanta's busiest trauma centers. That afternoon, Sarah and Tom were hiking through a remote alpine meadow when they discovered something extraordinary. 2 black bear cubs playing in the tall grass, while their mother was nowhere to be seen. This triggered the protective instincts of their mother, who had been watching from the tree line. The mother bear's charge from the forest was swift and terrifying. The 200-pound female covered the distance to Sarah's position in seconds. Her powerful legs propelled her massive frame with surprising speed. Her territorial fury focused entirely on eliminating the perceived threat to her cubs. Sarah attempted to retreat when she saw the charging bear, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward while still clutching her camera. The mother bear reached Sarah's position before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. The bear's massive paw connected with Sarah's back, her razor-sharp claws raking across Sarah's spine and shoulders, while the impact shattered several ribs. Sarah's camera flew from her grip as the bear's enormous weight pinned her to the ground, her attempts to call for help silenced by the crushing prise on her chest. The mother bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Sarah's neck, her crushing bite force-fracturing vertebrae and severing vital arteries. the bear's protective instincts drove her to continue the assault, until she was certain the threat to her cubs had been completely eliminated. Within minutes, Sarah's movements ceased as the mother bear's brutal assault proved fatal. The protective mother remained near Sarah's body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call, but Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.